Hey, Megamaniacs, this is Mr. MegaManFan. Like, share, comment, subscribe. You know all the things to do. The Retro Hunting Adventures is on the road today. We're at Ben's Game Zone in Ralston, and I'm gonna see if I can find anything that I want or need for my collection, or just something unusual and cool. But Ben's Game Zone usually has at least one thing that I'd want because they have quite a selection in the stores. So if you've never seen any of my previous videos at Ben's, you're in for a treat today. So stay tuned for the Retro Hunting Adventures, courtesy Mr. MegaManFan. Now, I had to mute the in-store music because they were playing some rock and roll from the 90s, but that didn't stop me from browsing and then just muting the video's audio section after I got back home. And since lately the music that is background music from Apple provided for iMovie, that seems to get flagged. I'm not going to use that either. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't when it comes to copyright. But there was a lot more than just these GameCube games on the wire racks. It turned out there was an entire, as Ben calls it, lid of GameCube games on the counter that I didn't even see when I walked in because I headed straight to the back. So I picked up a few things that I thought I might need, and what I actually ended up needing was right there in the front the whole time. But it was still nice to see some GameCube games that you don't usually see on the shelves. So the selection had been beefed up a little bit compared to some of my previous visits, but the real gems were definitely on the counter waiting for me there. However, I only got 2 GameCube games because what was even better was the Sega Dreamcast selection. They got in a whopping metric ton of new Dreamcast titles. I don't know how Ben sources his stuff, if he has pickers who go around to different garage sales, thrifts, and whatever, but he gets a lot of stuff in, so he has some good connections. And I found, I don't know any other way to put it, a crap ton of Dreamcast games that I was looking for. I knocked about a third of the Dreamcast games that I still needed off my list, from over 60 to just over 40. So yeah, pretty close to a third, like 66 to 44 in one shot. In fact, there's going to be so much Dreamcast footage in this episode that it's actually going to be a 2-part episode. So you're going to have to come back next week for the second part of the Retro Hunting Adventures to see the full story, because you can't get it all here in one shot. With the amount of Dreamcast games they had to pull, there was enough time for me to browse through the Super Nintendo games and see if I could find anything in particular here that I needed. And Super Nintendo, it's a little more iffy. There's not as many that I need, and box upgrades are kind of where I'm at with that collection anymore. And none of the boxed games that they had in the glass case were ones that I wanted to get, or in some cases I already had. Like, basically the commons that you find complete in box, because to be blunt, they aren't very desirable. There's not a lot of people who want the sports games, the fishing games. Those can show up complete in box in almost any retro store, because that's the nature of the beast. They're not the high-end stuff like Zelda, Metroid, Mario that people want complete in box, the really, really cream of the crop stuff. But you never know what you might find unless you look. So I had to take the time, since I had the time, and look through their Super Nintendo case and see what was available. And this whole time that I was doing that, there was a family there, and the mother kept trying to tell their child of whatever age, hey, let daddy have his me time. She said that multiple times, like, daddy's having his me time right now. And I was thinking, Oh dear, if I have kids, is this what it's going to be like going to the video game store? My wife and I will be there, and she'll be telling our son or daughter, Daddy's having me time right now. Just let him be for a little bit. Yeah, that's probably what would happen. Well, this was definitely me time for me. I probably spent at least a half hour in Ben's game zone, not counting the time it took to pull the games, and here's what I left with. These are all the new Dreamcast games. The top hitters among them were Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare, Grand Theft Auto 2 was a pretty big one as well. The next Tetris Online I'd been looking for a while, even though that can't be played online anymore. Sword of the Berserk Guts Rage was a pretty big one too. And Walt Disney's Magical Racing Tour. And here are the two GameCube games that I picked up. FIFA Street 2 Complete and City Racer, sadly, with no manual inside. Now, at first I was worried that Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare wasn't working, but then it turned out the person who put them in there when they pulled the disc put this one in the disc 2 tray and vice versa. So I was trying to start it up from disc 2, and there's obviously no boot code on it to even do that with. It just refuses to. So once I turned the power off and put disc 1 in and started over, it booted up just fine. Although fine might be debatable because they really live up to the dark part of Alone in the Dark with this game. It's so dark, I couldn't even see what I was doing. And since I was filming, I didn't want to turn up the brightness just to be able to play this game and then blow out every other game that I was trying to test or play. But yeah, if you're going to play Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare, you probably want to turn the brightness way up on your television because I couldn't see jack. And it was even more infuriating when the Dreamcast controller has a perfectly good analog stick, and yet for whatever reason this has tank controls, like Tomb Raider, the original PlayStation game tank controls, where you have to turn left and right and then use up to move forward. There's no reason for that when there's an analog stick right freaking there on the controller for a full 360 degrees of motion. You could have used that D-pad for anything else, for inventory, for weapons, for resetting the camera. But no. Whoever designed this game, pardon me for saying so, you did a really piss poor job. If I was going to re-release this, if I was the person who had the intellectual property rights and the ability to do so, I would have a brightness setting in the options menu, and I would allow you to switch from tank controls to analog controls. It's the only way I would ever consider playing more of it. Here's 4x4 Evolution, or if you want to speed things up, just call it 4x4 Evo. This one, I think I could get into it, given time. There are a lot of racing games from this era. N64, Dreamcast, PlayStation seem to be overloaded with them to a degree, but I felt like the controls on this one were alright. The vehicle handles pretty well. The graphics seem to be, obviously they're not next-gen Xbox Series X or PS5, but they're good. I don't have a problem with how this looks or plays. It's as good as anything else from the Dreamcast era. So, yeah, I would probably play this game some more beyond just testing it. The motion of the vehicle is fun. You get airborne, and I don't think it helps you move faster, but it feels good. Kind of makes you wish you were in a cockpit controller where you get that little elevated boost when you go over a hill. Anyway, speaking of games that are about driving, here's Four Wheel Thunder. The announcer is really excited when this game starts up. He screams, "Four Wheel Thunder!" Just reminds me of that Strong Bad skit where he's like, "Sunday, Sunday, Sunday, the cheat rolls down a hill in a tire. Sunday, Sunday, Sunday." Yeah, now, four-wheeler is not as good as 4x4 Evolution. This one could be called another alone in the dark nightmare, because on this indoor track, you can't see shit. Like, you go through a tunnel in the track, and you're going to run straight into a wall. Again, this is not the brightness of my display. This is not the AV ports. This is the game the way it was designed, because every other game I'm playing for this video looks fine, runs fine, is fine. They just didn't design the indoor sections very well. And if you were doing this in a real racing environment, wouldn't you have lights on the indoor section of the track anyway, so the racers could see what they were doing? And that just frustrated me to no end, and my game was off physically, literally. I couldn't handle the vehicle because I was already pissed at these dark sections that I had to drive through that you can't tell what you're doing. So, do not recommend. Would not necessarily play again, but at least it's one more Dreamcast game that I don't need to find, so I'm happy with that. I'm also happy that I got Arrow Wings 2. That's a little weird, though, because I don't have the first Arrow Wings yet, so I got the sequel and not the prequel. And I immediately tried to break the game. There's something about air flying, cockpit, airport type games where I just always want to take the plane as high as I can possibly go. So that's the thing I did. I went into the freestyle mode, or the free flying mode, whichever it was called, and I immediately nosed my jet straight up into the air to see how far I could take it. And I got to about 30,000 feet. I thought it would stall me. I'm laughing because it's like, yeah, you just have the engine stall out when you get into the upper atmosphere, but no, it just pushed me gently back down below 30,000 feet. I'm like, that's no fun. Either make me die or find a way to show me that I can go higher than that. Like, you're not going to let me, but you'll let me see it, and then you'll say, sorry, that's out of bounds. Or you'll just make me plummet back to Earth. But instead, it just gently nudges you back in the right direction. It's like when people do wall zips in speedrunning and you get nudged backwards. But instead, because they're turned around the other way, the nudge backwards zips them through to the next room because it's broken. It wasn't coded well enough to prevent somebody being zipped to the other side. Only there's no zips here in Arrow Wings. I wish there were. Army Men Sarge's Heroes is one I would definitely come back to, although you don't have to get the Dreamcast version. This came out for multiple things. PlayStation, might have even been on Xbox, but I know it was on PlayStation and N64. The Dreamcast version seems to be a little bit harder to find, though, and the price certainly reflects that. But basically, you're a little green man, like one of those plastic toy soldiers from the Toy Story movies, and you're the green guys who are the good guys, and you're running around shooting the tan guys who are the bad guys. It's really not more sophisticated than that. You pick up health, you pick up ammo, you shoot the bad guys, and you complete whatever objectives it tells you to complete. The controls are solid. The graphics are befitting of a game based on little plastic army men coming to life. I got no issues with Army Men Sarge's Heroes. This one, I will play some more. Next, we have ESPN Track and Field. Well, not a whole lot I can say about a track and field game that you wouldn't already know if you've ever played a track and field game, because what do? You mash buttons, and you mash them to run faster, to win the racing events or the swimming events, and then you push them at the right time to release a javelin or to do a long jump or vault over a pole or hand off the baton in a 4x4 race. You know what it is. Then we've got NBA Tonight, which is another ESPN game, and to make sure it was working, I just picked autoplay and let the computer play the computer, which was kind of funny because You see some of these players taking terrible shots, and the commentators are even criticizing them for it. You would think, since it was computer controlled, they would just take the open shots instead of taking crappy shots from long range, but I guess the AI isn't that smart. Here's Grand Theft Auto 2. It's a little surprising what this one goes for on Dreamcast. I didn't realize it was either a low print run or a high demand title, because this is pre GTA 3 when everything became a 3D perspective. We still got the top down of the original Grand Theft Auto, so I didn't think that was a big thing for GTA collectors, but apparently it is, or the Dreamcast was just so much of a flop that they didn't make that many copies. And finally, we have Hoyle's Casino, and this is going to be where part 1 ends, because I got a delivery from Omaha Steaks and I had to answer the door and go get it. So thanks for watching. Come back for part 2.